Let's get real. Border crossings are down in the wake of President Biden's executive actions that he took after Congress failed to act.
So he could have taken action.
He wanted Congress to resolve that because that would have been more durable. But when Trump came in, talked Republicans out of their own bipartisan project because he didn't want the issue to get better. Remember, the worse things are at the border, the better things get for Donald Trump. So he has a vested interest in it remaining chaotic down there. I think this also helps to explain why he didn't exactly conclusively solve it when it was his turn. But I saw something else really important happening at the Republican National Convention on the border and the talk about immigration, which we all recognize is a problem, which is they tried to paint this narrative that if you live somewhere far from the border and immigration hasn't affected you personally, you need to think that immigration is a driver of crime. That was the real message. Immigration leads to crime.
Well, there are blue state governors and mayors who say every state is a border state now. That's Democrats.
Yeah, and now they're saying, but what the false message of the RNC was that this is leading to an increase in crime.
Well,
and I think it's really important that we talk about crime.
Have been very high profile about people. If they had not been in this country illegally,
this is my
people
point,
would still
right?
be alive.
Trying to make people think that crime is up when crime is down under Joe Biden and crime was up under Donald Trump. Now, I don't know how often that gets reported on this network, so if you're watching this at home, do yourself a favor and look up the data.
Well, we invite that.
Great. So if you look this up at home, you will know that crime went down under Biden and crime went up under Trump,
categories.
and I think the violent crime, for sure. So I think the really important thing to ask is, why would America want to go back to the higher crime that we experienced under Donald Trump?
That was Pete Buttigieg making short work of Fox's Shannon Bream, who was perfectly content to do the Republican Party's bidding by confronting Buttigieg on the border after Donald Trump ensured that the border issue wouldn't be solved for precisely this moment. Remember, 3 senators negotiated a very conservative border bill that would fix the very issues that Republicans have spent so long complaining about. And yet, Donald Trump, recognizing that solving the border issue would preclude him from campaigning on it, demanded that the bill get killed, which is precisely what Republicans did. And so now, rather than Shannon acknowledge that obvious reality, she instead opts to do Trump's bidding by pretending that the blame here lies with the Democrats. A broken media propping up a broken party, all on behalf of a wannabe autocrat. And by the way, that's also a point I made on air to Piers Morgan.
Okay, Brian, save us your horror and outrage. I mean, this whole issue of immigration, I don't think any fair-minded Democrat in America could possibly look at the number of people that have come over the border illegally in the tenure of President Biden and not share everybody else's view that is completely unsustainable and clearly has been a failed policy on the southern border. Do you think it's been a success or a failure?
Well, all of this might suggest that we need some legislation on the border. And in fact, we had 3 senators, Kyrsten Sinema, Chris Murphy, and Republican James Lankford, negotiate a border bill that was not only the most conservative border bill that any Democrat could have signed, but it had no comprehensive immigration reform, which is historically the absolute condition that Democrats require. Instead, it had Ukraine aid that was attached to it, which passed anyway, which means there was nothing that the Republicans gave up. And yet Donald Trump issued his clarion call to Republicans because he thought it was too important to preserve the issue of the border as a campaign issue, and so he wouldn't allow this to be solved. So for Tommy and George, spare us the grandstanding about the border when I didn't hear either one of you come out and say that this border bill needed to be passed when Donald Trump was making sure that it didn't get passed because he wanted to make sure the border was as chaotic as humanly possible. But the goal here, as Pete mentioned, is twofold. One is that Republicans get to continue fear-mongering about the border as an issue of identity. Republicans want nothing more than to appeal to a deep-seated and long-standing xenophobia that they themselves have spent years fomenting. But second is they will get to exacerbate that issue by then suggesting that those same immigrants are then responsible for a surge in crime, which is apparently happening right now. Of course, not only is that not even close to true, and not only do immigrant communities have less crime than native majority communities, and not only do immigrants commit less crime per capita than native-born Americans, but crime is actually significantly down right now during the Biden-Harris presidency. Murder and rape are both down 26%, robbery is down 18%, aggravated assault is down 13% in the first quarter, overall violent crime is down 15%, reflecting drops in every region from 10% in the West to 19% in the Midwest. Property crime, meanwhile, is down by 15%. On every single metric across the board, the United States is is actually safer now than when Donald Trump was in office. So if they want to talk about the issue of crime, be our guest. And of course, Pete knows that Fox won't report that because this network exists to carry water for the Republican Party, even if that means spending $787 million to do so. And so Pete quite literally just uses the opportunity to turn directly to the camera and tell the audience himself, which is smart. Do not rely on these right-wing hosts to ever do the right thing. Here's the deal. Shannon Bream and the rest of these hosts at Fox News know the truth. It's not that they need to be persuaded. They already understand. It's just that they don't want to tell their audiences the truth. Pete is never going to get Shannon Bream to admit these things, meaning the point isn't and cannot be to convince her. It has to be to reach people directly and convince them. Forget the hosts. Go on there and talk directly to Americans like Pete Buttigieg just did. That's the way to reach people. Use the platform and cut out the bad faith actor sitting in the host chair. And all of this, by the way, is indicative of a broader problem on the right. These people are not in government to fix things. They are there to break things so that they can pin the blame on the Democrats as a way to help themselves win the next election. And they're so shameless about it that Trump literally broadcast his plan to prevent the border vote from passing, and Republicans put Trump's rationale on full display, and yet still they are pretending that it's the Democrats' fault. I legitimately don't know which one is worse. Republicans exacerbating a problem because they want to derive a political benefit from it, or the extent to which they believe their audience is stupid enough to not realize what's happening. Although at this point, we really shouldn't be surprised, considering this is a party that has nothing to actually run on. They are on the wrong side of healthcare, they're on the wrong side of climate, the wrong side of gun safety, the wrong side of abortion rights, the wrong side of voting rights, and the wrong side of democracy. And so their only remaining option then is to lie to the American people. But we can all see through it. We can recognize the obvious games that they're playing. We can see that after promising to work on lowering costs if they took control of Congress, they got the House and instead embarked on a 16-month investigation into Hunter Biden that went exactly nowhere. They constantly tell you that they're going to look out for you until the very moment that they get power, and then they immediately pivot to looking out for themselves. Their sole priority is not lowering costs, it's not adding jobs, it's not making healthcare more affordable, it's not making this country safer or more prosperous, it is ensuring that they take power and they remain in power, period. So good on Pete for exposing the lies on their own home turf. And hopefully this can serve as a test case for other politicians who get invited onto right-wing media. Your job is not to convince a host that does not want to be convinced of anything. Your job is to talk directly to those watching, because we're on the right side of the issues. The battle for us is to drown out the liars who try to convince their audiences that that's not the case. I've got a really exciting announcement. I've written a book. It's called Shameless. This book explores how Republicans have exploited their historical branding while attacking our democracy, how the media has proven itself a willful participant, and how Democrats can learn from this to rebalance the political scales and save our democracy. It has been a lifelong dream of mine to write my own book, and so I'd like to ask you to pre-order it by clicking the link right here on the screen. And if you buy within this pre-order period, your book is going to come with a signed nameplate. As you know, I've never had a single sponsor on my channel. I don't ask for money or anything like that, but if you're looking for a way to support me, this is hands down the best way to do it. So again, follow the link right here on the screen, and thank you from the bottom of my heart for pre-ordering Shameless. And as always, make sure to subscribe to see more of my content.